Hey everyone, this is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today we're going to take a look at the astrology of September. And with me again today is Alex Amorosi. I'm really excited to have him back. He is going to be helping me break down the astrology of the month, just as he did for the month of August. You guys really enjoyed him. I really like working with him, so he's back. Really, I'll bring him on in just a second. Don't forget, before we get into it today, to like and subscribe, share your comments, click the notification bell for updates. All that stuff helps the channel to grow. You can also find a transcript of any of my talks on the website every day, nightlightastrology.com. If you go over there right now, I'm going to take you there. You can also see that we have pre-registration sale that lasts until September 12th on 2 new classes. One is the Roots and Spheres program, which is a new and full moon circle that will be gathering throughout 2023. My wife Ashley and I will be leading it. And throughout every moon cycle, we'll be breaking down the astrology while also working with different plant teachers and really trying to deepen our relationship with the astrology by also pairing it with spiritual practice, and I guess you could call them rituals of transformation that we've designed to help people get more out of the astrology than, you know, just that kind of layer of forecasting info. So hopefully you'll check that out. The Roots and Spheres program begins in January, but right now we're running an early bird sale, so you can save a couple $100s off. There's a payment plan and tuition assistance if you need it as well. The Masterclass series is also starting in the new year. This is probably ideal for people who have a little bit of experience with astrology already. There's 4 Masterclass series, one for every season of 2023, starting in the winter with the mysteries of the moon cycle, morning star, evening star, the cycles of Venus and Mercury. We're looking at zodiacal releasing in the summer and unlocking temperament and personality in the fall. So that rounds out the Masterclass series for 2023. It's a new thing we'll be doing annually. And you can find there's an early bird payment available for that as well, payment plan and tuition assistance. So you have until pre-registration sale lasts until September 12th. So be sure to take advantage of that. All right. Well, all of that being said, I'm very glad to welcome my buddy Alex back.
Hey, man.
Hey, Alex.
It's psyched to be
Good
back.
to have you back.
We're turning into like the weekend update on SNL for astrology.
That's right. That's
it.
right. Yeah, exactly. We had so much fun last month, and I got such rave reviews about the rapport that we have and the way we broke down the astrology. I was like, well, let's do it again.
Awesome. Psyched to be here.
Yeah. So we're going to be breaking down the astrology of September. And there's a lot of big astrology in the month ahead. By the way, if you want to learn more about Alex, you can find him on Instagram at Alex Amorosi Healing. That's the Instagram handle. Website is still a work in progress for the astrology portion, but Alex is also a yoga teacher and an energy healer. So we have a lot in common, and a great astrologer too. So we're glad to have you back. And let's get into the astrology of September. We're going to start by looking at, we're just going to kind of just do a tour of all of the major astrological transits of the month, starting on September 1st. I'm going to go ahead and put the real-time clock up so we can see it here. And I'm going to also get, let's see if the marker turns into the massive marker today.
I'm so excited.
I know, right? And you know what? I've been playing Hellenistic, so I'm going to have to add the outer planets back in. Here we go. All right, there we are. So let's start off at the beginning of the month. I mean, first of all, I think that one of the things we ought to start with is that one of the major transits that really tones the entire month, even though it's not perfecting exactly, it really almost like the autumn season is, there it is. It turned into massive marker. So it's Saturn and Uranus. I know, it was like the first thing, it was like, yep, I'm back.
It's
so
the hot pink
Saturn,
too, man. It's the hot pink too.
Dude, I know. Like, it's never hot pink. Yeah, no, we're keeping it. Okay, so in fact, I can make it even bigger. Look, there we go.
There we go. Yeah.
So Saturn Uranus. I know. It's like the monster truck rallies.
Yeah.
Sunday. All right, so we have Saturn. Whoops. Okay, we're not off to a good start. Hold on, let me actually get it. Okay, this is appropriately sized. There's Saturn. There's Uranus. They are meeting throughout the month. what's going to happen pretty quickly as the month gets going is we're going to see Saturn's retrograde brings it down to within about a degree of Uranus. And that square between the two planets continues all throughout the month to the point where it's a little less than a degree away by the end of the month. So when you have two slow moving planets like that, nearing a square, now they actually turn directions and they refrain from the perfection of the aspect, but it's it's a bit like the blood pressure machine in the doctor's office when they're taking your blood pressure, starts squeezing down, and you're like, this is fine. And they're like, is it fine? Is it going to be okay? Is it going to take my arm off? What's going to happen? Exactly. So what are your thoughts about Saturn Uranus this month, and just what to expect overall, given the fact that this pressure from these two planets is mounting?
I think, well, this forms really the backdrop of the whole month. I mean, they're in engagement range now, and they're going to get much closer. And they're going to refrenate. That's my new verb that I made up. They're going to refrenate before they get close to each other, to the minute perfection. But I think we see a revisiting of themes that we've been seeing basically since, you could go all the way back to the March of 2020 when Saturn first entered Aquarius, and there was at least a whole sign square. But progress and staying the same, those are some big, themes you can use for this. Wanting to break free of convention while wanting to keep things the same, and a real tension between the two, and the square bringing a lot of friction between the two ideas. But I think, like, when I was looking at sort of the layers of this month, this was definitely the base layer. This sort of sets the pedal tone or the bass note for the month. Of a more, if it wasn't there, I don't think that this month would feel quite as electric and shaky in some ways as it can with this returning aspect.
Yeah, it feels to me like whatever we have to say about September, it's all happening within that dynamic between Saturn and Uranus, which, if we describe it simply, like you said, is sort of like, do I want to stay the same or do I want to change? Another way of looking at it might be that Saturn has very principled ideas about how things should change. So Uranus is the revolutionary impulse, and Saturn wants to take that impulse and form it and control it. I've rarely found in my life that the creative Uranian impulses do well when you're trying to control or be too premeditated about them. So one thing that comes to my mind is, like, we should be careful this month not to, try to harness or control a creative impulse that, needs an organic space within which to unfold. That's not to say that there's no, that we can't bring any structure or discipline or something like that to the way that, we might be trying to implement change. But I'm just cautious about the demands of Saturn over Uranus, especially since Saturn's in the superior position, if we want to look at it that way.
No, I think what's really interesting about this is, like, you can look at it both ways, right? Where there's, like, if you have those creative, spontaneous impulses of Uranus, there's probably going to feel like there's a clamp that comes onto them pretty quickly from Saturn, right? There's that sort of feeling. But there can also be, like, the clamping down or the wanting to hold back that Saturn brings, not letting, maybe that doesn't need to be so, Uranus would bring the more impulsive quality to that, being like, oh, okay, well, hang on, let me just actually stay in this more, like, stayed position for a second and maybe not follow those. So I think it could go either direction in how that works. But it's Jaws the Revenge. It's the third movie.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, if you think about, like, that image, the jaws of life, where they pull, it's a very Saturn Uranus image, because Saturn was like the enclosure and Uranus is the freedom from enclosure.
Right.
I wonder how much that will be a theme as well, where there is some need to break out of convention. It's like Uranus is always sort of breaking conventions, but when you put it with Uranus, or Saturn, it's almost like Uranus is wanting to break something open that has a lot of history behind it. There's like a pressure or something that's been mounting pressure for a long time, and now you're reaching a breaking point where it's like, okay, I'm done. So that could get interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's Saturn in Aquarius too, which is interesting because I always find the paradox of Aquarius is it's Saturn's sign, and there is that sort of we will do it this way, but it is very future-looking sign in a lot of ways and very technological. What is going to be best for all of humanity type of idea. And I think that there's these two ways of approaching it. Uranus being like let's just bust it all and do something completely revolutionary, and Saturn being like, we're going to do it this way in this very rational, ordered, precise idea way. And I think that the two actually can work together. It's the fact that they're in a square aspect that brings the Mars-like aspect to it, the competition between the two, that it feels
Yeah,
like.
that's right. Or even that there is some kind of pushback from someone or something else.
Yeah.
Like here is a design that we're trying to implement, something we're trying to build or create. And then Saturn Uranus shows up as the square shows up as pushback from some kind of oppressor, might be too strong of a word, but someone who doesn't want you to do what you're doing or doesn't want you to finish or complete what you're doing or something like that. Yeah. Well, a little bit about that to start. Felt like we needed to start there, but let's get into the first transits of the month and start taking a look at them. So when I'm going to go bring this back in time a little bit, let's get down to the first. Right away at the start of the month, there's a bunch of really interesting now that Mars is in Gemini to stay for a very long time. We do have an interesting aspect at the beginning of the month right away, which is Mars and Gemini sextiling Jupiter and Aries. Now, Jupiter is in Mars's sign, so this is a form of reception. Sextile is of the nature of Venus, which is very harmonious, and Jupiter is in the superior position, which would mean that Mars is getting probably some kind of very nice, this is a very beneficial like whatever Mars is trying to do, it would seem that there is some form of support or aid or help that's coming through. Even like, let's just say that, I could imagine this transit like you're at the gym, which is, that's been a big part of my life over the past year or so, has been working out regularly. And there's some workouts where, making it over the last couple of sets or something is like, oh my gosh, this is really hard. I just don't know if I can make it through. And then suddenly you find that extra energy reserve and you tap into it and you push through. So it's like, it sucks to get through that last hump, that there's something about Mars that can't be taken away, right? There's effort involved, but you have some form of support with Jupiter there.
Yeah, I just heard the Rocky fanfare in my head. Dun 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 dun. That's sort of like, it has that kind of feel to it, and I think Jupiter. I always say, Jupiter, unless it's in a really tough position, will bring out the better angels usually of a transit, and I think that it adds to Mars and Gemini too. It can feel of like that quick moving, fast moving. Kind of almost like can feel erratic energy of Mercury when Mars is there. Jupiter brings a little bit of order and meaning and cohesion and like let's take all that fast moving stuff and let's make a little structure out of it. Let's make a little meaning out of it. That sort of idea.
Yeah, Jupiter, the word that comes to my mind as you're talking is coherence. It's like Mars and Gemini is sometimes so fast that it becomes incoherent, and Jupiter in the superior sextile with reception to Mars says, let's grant it some coherence. It could also be the kind of thing where it grants it strength, like it gives it power, or it gives it an ally or a resource or a person. But I think the other word that's really good is coherence, because like you said, the Mars in Mercury's sign can be like chaos magic, so Jupiter may lend a little bit more coherence or direction to Mars there.
Yeah, no, it was funny that the day Mars went into Gemini, I was trying to meditate, and I, for the life of me, could not keep my thoughts in any sort. I was just like, oh, Mars is in Gemini, and I think that this brings that sense of mindfulness or coherence to it. Yeah,
dude, sure. And that's my natal placement, so welcome to my need for meditation.
No, actually, where I've been doing some mantra, and it's really helpful because it actually focuses that. It was really, really helpful for that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, like surprise, surprise that I, as Mars and Gemini, that I would need mantra meditation,
Yeah,
not that regular meditation would be
yeah.
like not a pretty, a good fit for me. That mantra meditation, repeating words over and over again would do something that would allow me to meditate. Yeah.
Mm.
Okay. Well, September 2nd, Mercury in Libra opposes Jupiter in Aries. Now, let's add into this. This is not just your normal opposition because Mercury is also sextiling Mars, who is in Mercury's sign, and then Mars is just separating from Jupiter. So this isn't like, I wouldn't look at this opposition and say, okay, you're going to have really big debates, intellectual or ideological feuds with people, which might be typical of Mercury opposite
Right.
Jupiter across Libra and Aries, right? Like
Yeah, yeah,
can I keep the peace or am I going to tear someone a new butthole? Like
yeah.
that's a new that's a new Mercury. That's a very standard like Mercury in Libra opposite Jupiter and Aries thing in my mind
Yeah.
is like, am I going to be a diplomat here or am I going to go medieval? And I think
Yes.
the thing that saves it from all of that is the fact that Mercury has some reception and connection with Mars, who's also in favor with Jupiter.
Yeah, I think so too. I think there's a lot more solution. You have a lot more. You have that lovely trine which softens up the opposition. I mean, normally what I was thinking of this with the opposition was like, don't let your mouth write a check that your ass can't cash. That sort of feeling. Like, you can get really popped up of like, hey man, guess what? I think you're a blah 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 or whatever. But I think that you've got the softening here at least, where Mars can be like, okay, believe it or not, Mars being like, okay, let's we can flow the energy a little bit easier here with the trine. If it was a square, it'd be a different story. But I think that helps out a
Right.
lot.
I would watch for tension or conflict or just really being at opposite ends in terms of how we see or are looking at something, right around the beginning of September. But
Yeah.
I think the idea here is that there's enough favorable energy in the air that things can get worked out. It's also interesting to me that like there's two things that are going to happen that suggest to me that there's mounting tension in relationships or communication, that it could lead to very different ways of even looking at how relationships ought to be done, and that then adjustments need to be made. Because look at the next two transits. September 5th,
Right.
Venus enters her fall in Virgo, right? And so now we have Venus fallen in Mercury's sign, Sun is in Mercury's sign, Mars is in Mercury's sign, Mercury's in Venus's sign. So now we have mutual reception between Mercury and Venus, which is good, but Venus is debilitated and Mercury's just separating from Jupiter. So if I take all of that together, the mood that I get here is like, yeah, there are people who might be on one side of the brain and people working out of the other side of the brain, so to speak, on how to meet or deal with or approach something. And then I'm just going to hop ahead to this one on September 9th. Mercury retrogrades in Libra, which suggests revision or having to redo or reconsider something. So I look at this and I think, the one thing that comes to my mind is don't be surprised if you have some people who are being way too rational about things, or they're using a part of the brain that's almost not human, or it feels insultingly impersonal. Or they're bottom lining and they're overlooking a human element somehow, and trying to strong arm or something like that. On the other hand, I would say that there at the same time, there's a look and feel in the air of like, okay, wait, let's just pause and reconsider things. And with Mercury and Venus in mutual reception and Mercury turning retrograde, maybe we can avoid fisticuffs. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, Venus is in her fall in Virgo, but that's a very careful Venus that's hosting Mercury. That's a very cautious, let's really think this through, really analyze all, dot all the I's and cross all the T's. So I think that does help too. I think that, it's interesting when I was kind of layering this, I was thinking there's Saturn, Uranus, and then I thought really Mercury is the second layer of this. Mercury is so prominent this month and related to so many planets. There can feel like And also we have basically all the planets in air or earth or fire signs, with Neptune holding down in water. So there can feel like a very sort of detached feeling, and that you could rub somebody the wrong way in communication, of feeling like you're trying to mediate something or get something figured out on that very diplomatic Mercury and Libra, but it can feel like you're almost misunderstood because it comes across as cold, or it comes across as detached, or it comes across as a little too intellectual.
Right.
Yeah, sort of idea.
I could also see like getting like responding to, like, if you feel like you've been slighted in a
Yeah,
negotiation or in a
yeah,
communication of some kind, that you become reactive.
hmm,
And it'd be a good month to also, practice your forgiveness muscles, because people may not even be aware of how they sound or how they're coming across. And a little
yeah,
bit of patience and reframing and, careful, look, this is why that may not work for me, or I'm not exactly crazy about how you're wanting to do things or how you're looking at things, but
right,
I want to figure something out. I think
right,
if you kind of like stick to the thought that things can be worked out and be careful, one of the things that in the Bhakti yoga tradition that we talked about, we talk about quite a bit, is be careful of the tendency to get offended.
yes,
Like like
yeah,
you're gonna do better when they're, even if you can, okay, wow, that was sort of offensive, but if you can just sort of put that on a shelf, maybe feel the pain or grief or whatever of that later, but don't hold on to the offensiveness and then act from that place, because you rarely help change the heart or mind of someone else. You rarely
yep.
end up feeling understood or heard if you act from the reaction of having been wounded or hurt or offended. So I think that that's probably good advice for the early part of this month, especially.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I love what you're saying there, and the idea of was kind of riffing off of that was, I always try to say, when there's an element not well represented, and right now that's water, is like, can you look for that element in this interaction? So if that's happening, being like, is that really their intent to be like that? Is this really? And let me get a little bit more information. Let me actually see, like, because probably Mercury, even though it's retrograde in Libra and Venus is in her fall as the host, is probably trying to broker some kind of deal or broker some kind of balance, or is thinking that it's acting in the way like that. And just like being like, can I just take a second and put a little compassion in my heart and think about it from, what's the intent here? How am I trying to connect with that going on?
Isn't that interesting that on September 10th we get the full moon in Pisces, which is
I know, right?
like it's like exactly what we need at this point in the cycle.
Hmm,
We need a
hmm.
full watery moon with Neptune.
Moon.
You know,
Hmm.
just to
Yeah.
kind of
Yes.
water, because there's a lot of like, there's just a huge amount of Mercury dominance with the Mercury retrograde, with Mars in Mercury's sign, with focus on Virgo, and then there's a bunch of fire and earth. So
Yeah.
to me, things could get very dry and
Hmm.
sort of mental, and I'm like,
Yeah.
exactly what you said. We need some water. There's water missing here.
Yeah.
Well, then on September 10th, the full moon in Pisces comes through. And I think the way I would describe it would be like, okay, now we have some emotional release. It's not
Yes.
surprising that on the 9th, 10th, Mercury is also turning retrograde, which, along with this full watery moon with Neptune, would start to, it's to me, it would start to signify some kind of softening or release of a hardened
Yeah.
posture if there has been one.
Yeah, I agree. And also, what I like about this lunation too is we've had some really jacked up lunations going on for a while, and this is a fairly tame. You've got Neptune conjunct Neptune. There's a very wide square from Mars, in that idea. But like, all in all, I like this lunation a lot. Yeah. And you get the sextile to Uranus too. Yeah, which
It
can
picks
help
up, yeah,
break.
I feel like.
Yeah,
Exactly. Right. Yeah. It feels like
yeah.
it can break. Keep going. Keep going.
It can break in what might feel very sort of like binary with that Mercury in Libra. Might And there's only this, so there's only that. Like, there might soften up a little bit with Neptune, and then Uranus comes along and sextile is like, and here's a whole brand new way of thinking about it, man, that you may have never considered before. or thinking
Yeah.
about what this person said, or thinking about this person, what they were trying to achieve, that sort of idea.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yep. I
Yeah.
think that's a great way of looking at it. There's also some supportive energy coming through on the 11th. We can see the same pattern where it's like the release of the rain on the dry soil, and the inventiveness. Well, okay, so then you go forward a day, and you've got the sun trining Uranus. So the day after the full moon, of course, brings the water, and then right away we get a trine to Uranus. I also like that the moon will be in Aries that day, hitting Jupiter. It just feels like
Yep.
movement. Mercury's turned
Yep.
retrograde. We got a big watery moon coming through. Then the sun trines Uranus. It feels like, oh, okay, let's move forward.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And we have these lovely Earth trines going on. This whole series of Earth trines, which are very productive too. Very kind of like getting stuff done and practical matters done. And Sun trine Uranus is always a nice way of like with the Earth energy kind of breaking out and being like, okay, let's really get some stuff going.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
it does. It feels like if there's any stalemates going on near the beginning of the month, they really feel like they're breaking apart post full moon.
Yeah.
With all of these
Yeah.
transits. I do feel like there's another sign, and I think this is a good sign, is if we go forward a little bit to about September 16th, we're looking then at a square between Venus and Mars. And see if I can look at it right there. So here we go. So a square from Venus and Mars it is a square. So there's, once again, it almost looks like there's another little picture of negotiation happening. Well, what do you know? Look at what's happening at the same time. Now we're getting Mercury coming back through its retrograde into the opposition with Jupiter, as Mercury and Venus, or as Venus and Mars are squaring. So to me, that loosening leads to renegotiation of some kind. Just putting it broadly.
Yeah, for sure.
Then,
And the other thing, I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
The other thing I was just noticing, I don't want to get too technical on it, but I was noticing, Mercury and Jupiter too are moving through Anticia and contra Anticia to Neptune at the same time, which is like an interesting thing where Neptune is in the background of this whole thing in a very sort of very backstage way, even for Neptune. Which I thought was really interesting when I was kind of looking at Mercury going back and forth over those oppositions to Jupiter. I'm like, what am I missing? And I was seeing that sort of aspect too. So there is that water element in the background. If you can like kind of lie back on that emotional compassion element of it, that can help.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah, I think
this idea.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's not a surprise that on the 18th, we get the sun then moving through the opposition to Neptune. It's almost like a reprise of the full moon. The full moon in Pisces. So it's really interesting. It's almost like, it's like, how many times in a complicated court case could human emotion, compassion, talks outside of court with the people you're not supposed to talk to at a bar or something, lead to a solution that does not have to result in one person being a loser.
Yeah, exactly. And the sun and Neptune, and this is a strong aspect of my own chart. So the sun and Neptune idea too. I always say, checking out, being alive with the fantasy and understanding that there's this beautiful cosmic perfection, but also, I think the sun in Virgo helps Neptune and Pisces come down a little bit of being like, there's also beautiful in the everyday. There's also beautiful in the earth. There's also beautiful in the imperfection and messiness of everyday existence. And I think that's a tension I've often found with some Neptune and myself and with clients, is coming down from like the ideal or the this and being like, yeah, this is also ideal with the mess and the productiveness that happens on the earth plane level too, as well.
That's right. And that goes very nicely along with Venus in fallen Venus in Virgo's trine to Uranus, which comes through on the 20th. Just a little bit further down, you get the same idea of, to me, okay, here it is. Can you see? Yeah, there we go. Okay, so what I was going to just add to what you're saying is that I think that forgiveness or acceptance, and letting go of rigid positions or binary thinking on something is big. Now, to me, the idea that, you know, there's openings for new ways of thinking about things, for accepting things as they are, or for working with, like you said, almost like just seeing the sacred in the mess.
Yeah.
Well, what, you know, a fallen Venus trine Uranus. Uranus is such a idealist. You know,
Yeah.
Uranus loves the idea of the revolution is that there is a new image and you have to somehow smash the old one, you know, and then
Yeah.
you somehow embody this new image. It's very Promethean in that sense. People always compare Uranus to Prometheus. Well, if you have a fallen Venus connecting in a positive way with Uranus in Venus's sign, it's as though something broken can become something ideal, like those
Yeah.
pots that they after they're broken, they remold them with gold. You've seen those before?
Yeah. Kintsugi. Yeah, it's that Japanese art. It's one of my favorite things.
I think it's beautiful. I've only seen pictures of them. I've never actually seen one in person, but that's what came to my mind.
There's a store down in Cambridge that sells different types of pottery like that. That's absolutely incredible to see in person. How beautiful
Oh,
it is with the break and then the gold weaving through it, showing that
yeah,
beauty.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Well, we get to the fall equinox on the 22nd. The sun will ingress. What's really interesting about that day is the 22nd and the 23rd. As that fall equinox is happening, Mercury will be cazimi and then retrograding back into its exaltation, and being, you know, going from a sort of a peregrine position into a really dignified position, whereas the sun enters its fall. So it's this bizarre change of dignities that's happening simultaneously. I'm not sure what to make of it, other than I find it interesting that there we see the sun now moving through the opposition with Jupiter. So the idea
Mm.
of you know, conflicting ideals inside of ourselves and how we live and think and interact in different areas is persistent, like throughout the month, because here it is again. There's this really empowered moment of, you know, emboldened communication and having to maybe take a stand for something that you believe in or whatever. But you know, to me, if you go look at from the beginning of the month to the end, the idea of fundamental conflict or tension in relationships with people about ideas or plans or strategies is just repeated over and over, and then it
Yeah.
softens, and then it tenses up again. That to me feels like back to Saturn and Uranus being in the air. It's like there's a way of doing it. No, there's a different way of doing it, and like a competition.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because the sun in Libra, I always feel like the sun moves into an ambivalent place in Libra, where it's just like the sun wants to be clear and shine and be open, and this is how we, you know, this is how we see things, whatever. And all of a sudden in Libra, there's the darkening shadow of the fall coming over, and it's just like, wait, hang on a second, like I don't know, like is it this way or is it this way? And it's not a comfortable position, I think, for the sun to be in, which, you know, it's the sun, the ruler of Leo. I shine. You know, the ultimate I. And then in Libra, there's the ultimate duality, really, in one of the signs. And there's also the sense of like, wait a second, hang on, I am not really particularly comfortable here, and I have to check this ideal or check this clarity that I thought at once was so clear.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really
Yeah.
nice way of putting it. So if you know, if the sun is starting to, yeah, if it's dealing with what is the right or fair thing to do, and it's just having a hard time getting clear about it, well, it's receiving pressure from Jupiter and Aries. Like,
Yeah.
you know, either you better get clear because someone's pressing you, or there's a feeling of like, you know, you have to act here. It's not okay to just be ambivalent or to try to play both sides. Like, pick a side, damn it. And then the sun is like,
Right.
well, I don't know, you know. So if that's what's going on, isn't it interesting that there we see it again on the 24th? Now we're going to have Venus opposing Neptune. So you've got that softening, almost like a rainfall motif all over again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, what I really love about this Venus's transits, especially moving through this last part of Virgo, you know, with the trine to Uranus, now the opposition to Neptune. One thing I've often observed about the Virgo Libra arc is this very, very deeply seated guilt. I have to do it right. I have to be perfect. I have to be very rigid. And I think that these aspects like kind of help, you know, Venus have a glass of wine, so to speak. Just be like where it felt like she had to be so perfect and right and get it all right. It's like, yeah, you know what, man? Like, here's a softer, easier way of approaching that. So I like this, like 15 to 29 degrees of Virgo for Venus is in her transit, a little bit easier. And Mercury's back
Yeah,
with her too, in exaltation, that's helping out.
that's right. Yeah, Mercury's there helping out. Venus is also preparing to enter her own domicile, which
Yeah.
I should help things considerably because she's also starting to fall under the beams of the sun. She's getting a little bit burnt up, dried out.
Yeah.
It's, a slog for Venus in September. Although, like, I'm just thinking we're finishing the community garden that we're the teaching garden that we're building from our Kickstarter, and it's kind of a perfect placement for people who are like landscapers building a garden in, they'll be
Yeah.
finishing it while Venus is in Virgo, which feels like, so there's certain things where it's like, Venus in Virgo will perfectly describe something that's very Venus in an earth sign,
Yeah, totally. I mean, it very much is like here in Boston, during the Boston Marathon, there's what's called Heartbreak Hill, which is people run 20 miles of a race and they're like 6 miles out from Boston. They have to run up this huge long hill. It's a really famous part of the course, and I feel like they always look so relieved on the other side, and that's Venus kind of like, okay, I'm going to be in Libra. When you get to the sun, get some vitamin D. I'll get there. I can get there. Just one more run, one more step.
Yeah, once Venus gets into Libra, Venus will be in her own chariot. So she starts being protected from the beams of the sun. Things start lifting considerably. That opposition that Venus will eventually hit to Jupiter in early October will also be a real balm for all of the oppositions to Jupiter that have been passing through. It's not surprising that the new moon on September 25th will be in those early degrees of Libra opposing Jupiter again. So it's the same thing. And when I think about the Libra Aries axis, I think about that tension between, okay, I've got to do the fair thing, the balanced thing. I need to be discerning and wise and careful and diplomatic. And Jupiter in Aries, it's like, and you need to do something. You need to just bust a move, you don't always have to be, you can't always be diplomatic, like tip the scales and go for it. Punch someone about it. Let's go.
Yes. A little righteous anger, right? It's like, that should be the tagline for this when you put it up there.
Punch someone. Let's go. Exactly. Society.
It's the I and we. I think of that too. Like with Aries and Libra, I think it was like the I and we axis, right? And like sometimes the fairest thing is not the most mediated diplomatic solution. Sometimes the fairest thing is like, Aries. I always, I'm obsessed with the astrology of fate and what's it, Liz Green's discussion of Aries in that book, and talking about Aries is trying to take back the stolen kingdom, so to speak, but it does it through warfare. It does it through fighting for it. It doesn't through not by negotiating, by saying that's not right, and then just taking action on retrieving what was taken wrongfully. They just go about it in different ways, the opposite sides of the axis.
Yeah. On September 29th, Venus will enter Libra, just to kind of preview that, just jumping around a little bit here. That Venus's dignity will pick up, and then in early October, Venus will oppose that Jupiter. And so, it's just such a seesaw. And I feel like if I had to imagine what I might be learning from this, it would probably be that this is like, it's going to be like a master class in, in impulse control, and also in being aware of where vanity or my over concern for what other people think is informing the way that I'm trying to make decisions. So kind of like either or, like the dark side of Libra, maybe like, I'm just looking for some kind of pre-existing criteria by means of which to make a judgment that won't make anyone mad at me. And then, Jupiter on the other hand, which is, like maybe just impulsive and just like the battering ram that needs to check itself because it's gonna be reckless. So I feel like those two impulses back and forth, they're like masterclass in those for the next month.
Yeah, for sure. And I love, I think that it's nice that the punctuation mark on it is Venus coming into Libra, where it's almost like she could be like, okay, everybody, I'm here. Now, I hear you've had some problems, but we're going to have a nice, we're having a tough time deciding on what to do, but I'm here now. We're going to take care of it. It's like, It's like the substitute
Yeah.
teacher was in for a long time, and now like the real teacher came back and is like trying to figure out like what to do.
That's the perfect image. The sub, you had a sub for a while.
Yeah,
Everything got real crazy. The sub almost took
yeah,
their life. And then,
yeah.
you know, yeah, no,
Exactly.
that's, my God. So if we back up just a little bit, September 28th, there's one thing I want to hit on. There's a couple of trines, like, Mercury hits through a trine with Pluto. Venus goes through a trine with Pluto right around the same time. To me, that feels like, more in terms of Venus starting to purge herself of whatever difficulties have been there and then entering a strong position. But just for the sake of time, let's just end by looking at Mars in Gemini's trine to Saturn, which I think is a really interesting aspect. Mars and Saturn in ancient astrology, when they worked together, could be extremely positive, even though you have two sort of traditional, malefics. You have the two of them passing through an aspect on the 28th, around the 28th, 29th, the very end of the month. What comes to your mind when you think about Saturn trine, now in a Jupiterian type of relationship with Saturn, Mars and Saturn?
Well, so many things. I think first of all, a very elegant relationship between the two planets. It's a very sort of like, I always think of in musical terms, and Mozart being an air sign, there's this elegant music. There's this elegant music between the two. But to really make it practical, one of the things I always think it's missed about Mars a lot is that it was associated with science and technology and and also with medicine, which I always thought was really interesting. And I could see something here where there's just like a really innovative restructuring of technology or new technology or expansive technology starts coming up, particularly around the ideas of medicine. I've been thinking a lot about that with Mars and Gemini and the retrogrades too. The retrograde period coming up. That's one thing that comes immediately to mind about it.
Yeah. I feel like, again, this is of the nature of Jupiter. So you have support between the two of them. And I think about problem solving. I think about, because Mars is in Mercury's sign. So it's very strategic. And, Saturn in Aquarius gives you that 20,000 foot view. So it strikes me as a moment, one of those, like a moment of epiphany where you're able to somehow see the bigger picture and come up with an interesting idea or plan or way of doing something that, suddenly solves everything. Surprise, surprise, Venus is moving into an opposition with Jupiter at the same time. To me, that's like really starts suggesting that solutions to problems or resolution for all of those oppositions throughout September is starting to come through.
Yeah, for sure. And I think also, just noting too that Mars is really starting to slow down now and pick up some real intensity. And I was noticing that even this morning when I was going through the transits. Even now, Mars is really starting to slow in its progression. So you get a little bit longer with that aspect too than you might normally get with a Mars transit.
Yeah, that's a great point, right? And ancient astrologers had different ways of talking about the slowing down of a planet. If a malefic is like, really slow, it could mean that it's more problematic. I think that we might be starting to reach the point of structural, like if Venus is opposing Jupiter and coming up with the final handshake and a contract that everyone can agree on, to just kind of use that image. This to me would be like, okay, we're starting to realize the gravity of what has to be done or kind of change that's going to be implemented, which is implied by the upcoming retrograde.
Yeah, for sure. And Mercury's, Mars's host is in a great position, just about to turn, in its exaltation domicile, opposite Neptune, brings a little bit more water, a little bit more expansive, otherworldly thinking to the. Yeah, I agree. I totally agree.
Yeah, you're right. Mars is starting to get into the square with Neptune. I think the one thing that I would be a little bit careful of, since Mercury is still retrograde at this time, although Mercury is getting ready to turn direct at around, it's just about to the point where it's turning direct, is just making sure that you're not lunging at a solution while getting taken advantage of somehow.
Yeah.
Like a little bit of that Neptune, like just to like kind of touch back on what you were saying about Neptune having a strong role. I think as long as we're not like, look, I'll do anything to solve this problem, and I'm the one who's getting walked on, or people are taking advantage of me, or I'm not looking at all the details carefully, or something like that.
That also, it's interesting, the other two, because I think that that's also part of the conundrum sometimes for Virgo in of itself. There can be that aspect of Virgo that's not often talked about, because we often talk about the sort of buttoned up Virgo with being, obsessive and precise and stuff. But there can also be, I always think of, there's a song by Lady Gaga that I love called Government Hooker. And she says, I'll be your anything, I'll be your everything. You want me to be this, I'll be that, whatever it is. It's like that sort of morphing aspect that can happen in the double-bodied signs, but particularly with Virgo, being careful of that quality with Neptune involved.
Yeah, exactly. And then if you see, Mercury and Mars are in that sign, so they're like, look, I'll cook up anything as long as it makes this go away. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
right.
I could see that being maybe a little bit of an issue. What's interesting is that if this isn't, if the huge signature of Venus and Mars, like working things out, is repeated when we get into October, November with the eclipses coming up in Scorpio and Taurus. Although it gets a lot more entrenched and much deeper, more fixed patterns are being looked at. Whereas I feel like a lot of this is the feeling of a transitional space that's trying to be negotiated. You get into like October, November, and it feels like harder, more deeply entrenched things are being looked at. And that makes sense, since we're also getting Saturn and Uranus slowing down, stationing, turning directions. And I think that those are in fixed signs as well,
Yeah. And the eclipses too, not to get too ahead of it, but you'll have three or four planets clustered around the South Node during that Scorpio eclipse. They're all clustered there. So this is such an interesting month. It's so layered to me. That's what I kept thinking when I looked at it. Yeah.
It is, yeah. And it'll be really exciting to just watch it unfold, to take it transit by transit. And I think we'll do this again. You want to do this again next month?
Heck yes, I do. I was just going to say another word. Heck yes. I'm going to watch my language.
Good. No, glad. Yeah, for sure. I think it'll be fun. I think it'll be fun to revisit. I think one of the reasons I'm decided that I want to have a regular co-host for the month ahead is because it helps to be speaking to the same person about the topics as the months roll on, because then the conversation and the dialogue and recalling what happened and how things went month by month is a little bit easier than in having someone new every month. So I went in that direction. So for that reason, I think it'll be really good for us to keep doing it. So as long as you're game, we'll keep having you back.
I'm here, man. I love it. I also just love getting together with other astrologers and talking shop and really digging into the nitty gritty. It's so much fun and so needed, because we're so often working with, in our own little space. So it's nice to get together and do this.
It is. Yeah. It's very easy to, feel like I'm talking into the void sometimes. And hearing other people talk about the transits, it sparks more and more new thoughts that I don't have written down or whatever. So yeah, that's great. Well, thank you for being here again, Alex. Oops, I want to mention one more time. You can find Alex on Instagram, Alex Amorosi Healing. You can hit him up there if you want to do a reading or check out what he's up to. We'll be sure to get him back next month. Don't forget, everyone, to like and subscribe, share your comments. If you have a story about any of these transits, you can use the hashtag grabbed to share your stories, or email us grabbed@nightlightastrology.com. We aggregate those stories and sometimes share them so we can get a look at what you guys have been experiencing with the transits. That's always fun. And you can always email us if you don't feel like sharing them in the comment section. So that's why we provide the email address as well. Just know that if you share it, it might get used in a future talk. Now, if you don't forget, the other last thing I should say is don't forget we have the pre-registration sale on our new courses until September 12th. You can find those on our website, nightlightastrology.com. All right. Thanks, everybody. And we will see you again tomorrow. Bye.
Bye-bye.